This is Nathan Lawrence here at the Battle Hymnal, which is a CBC joint. I am joined today by my normal co-host, Josh Hancher and Graham Coffey. Graham Coffey of Dog Sports fame, Josh Hancher of Dog_stats fame on Twitter. And we are joined today by a special guest. His name is Parker. He is a sort of stats extraordinaire, TCU fan. He is the proprietor of Stats O War, a very, very good Twitter account for people who are gonna watch the. Let's be honest, anyone who watches this is a dork. I don't want to call out our listeners. He runs what is the name of the newsletter and the podcast, Parker? Something Purple?
Purple Theory newsletter and podcast, which is kind of like TCU Big 12 centric.
Absolutely. And he also is the proprietor of a very, very good website called, what is it? Something Graphs, CFB Graphs?
CFB Graphs, CFB-graphs.com, because somebody already had CFBgraphs.com. So
awesome. So,
yeah.
And are you tied into CFBdata.com, or are you just you're a contributor, right?
I'm actually not. So I'm a contributor to CFB Scraper, which is the R statistical software package that kind of helps people get data.
I use CFB Scraper. It's so good, dude.
Dude, it's awesome. So I have done the littlest bit of work on it. Like, I just had a couple contributions. It is exceeded in scope far beyond my contributions. They're very generous to keep my name on it. But that's Mayapon and Syme have done a lot on it. And so, but at CFB Scraper is the Twitter account. You can find both of them there because they're sharp dudes who know way more about the data science than I do.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, so today, obviously, for those of you listening, not a lot of UGA stuff going on. We could talk about like the quarterback battle, but that's not really let's not yell about that with the TCU fan president. That's a little too inside Georgia. So what I want to do first, and I just want to bounce around to all three of you, had a pretty big weekend. I think both in terms of results, over in Parker's neck of the woods, we had some, I don't know how surprising, Parker, I'm actually interested to hear your thoughts on how surprising the results were this weekend. And just also from all three of you, like, what are the first week of results of actual P5 on P5-ish competition? What do you think that tells us about the landscape of this season? And move as the spirit blesses you. I'm ready to hear.
I'm actually really happy with these results. And I'm jumping in first not because I like to see teams lose, but I was on a podcast like 2 weeks ago and we ranked the Big 12's offensive line units, and my bottom three offensive lines were in this order: Iowa State, Kansas State, and Kansas. And so seeing them struggle is no surprise to me. I think Arkansas State was a really, really bad loss, but the other two, good teams with potentially a lot of experience. I guess I'm just talking about Louisiana. Kansas is just awful. Kansas has no defense whatsoever. And so I don't think anything here was a surprise. I think we learned a lot that continuity matters. A lot of turnover on the offense for Iowa State and for Kansas State, but also in addition to continuity mattering, like you look at a Kansas State and Iowa State are also going to be heavily reliant on those February weight rooms and that kind of off-season development, and they were deprived of that in addition to spring football. So I think just if you were gonna intentionally kneecap programs like Iowa State and Kansas State, you would have set the offseason up like this. So not a surprise. Disappointing for the Big 12 on the whole, though.
Yeah, and I think that was sort of a theme that continued through with continuity. I mean, I don't know if you guys watched the Georgia Tech Florida State game.
I watched all 11 hours of it.
Yeah, that game was basically just like one team didn't have an offensive line. I mean, it is so clear that Florida State just couldn't block anything, and they were running like the simple, like Georgia Tech ran like three very, very basic stunts that are like stunts 101, and they were getting home with three dudes every time. And I think that is an interesting thing to think about with those February workrooms, is that like how much an offensive line relies on its ability to congeal around a certain set of players and for those players to be in the right place at the right time. I mean, anyway, what are you thinking, Graham? What are your thoughts on the season?
I mean, I think the kind of surprising nature of the two Big 12 losses with Iowa State and Kansas State, it made me a little more excited just for the season as a whole, because like, ever since 2007, it's like, we want to get back to this dream season of like total chaos. Watching Clemson play Wake Forest, like obviously that's not going to happen in the ACC, but I mean, I think it's a weird year already. So like, let's just lean into it in a college football and get really weird and let let's have a bunch of upsets. But my biggest impression too is like watching that Iowa State Louisiana game. Iowa State looked so slow compared to Louisiana, especially in the skill positions. And it's one of those things. It's like, especially this year with not as much coaching, not as much weight room time as you guys are talking about. Like, I think you're looking at some of these, where it's like a video game. It's just like whoever has the most raw speed, like get them the ball and let them go, and it's like there's going to be a little less maybe of the actual schematic stuff that matters here in the first couple of weeks, I feel like.
Well, I want to touch on two things. Number one, I think we're doing this on Discord too. So you guys are watching this on Twitter. So if there's a Discord person that can tell us that we have audio, that'd be awesome. Number two,
I'm pretty sure we do.
Parker had an awesome interview with Bud Elliott of 247, and he talked about recruiting, right? So, and I've been looking at recruiting numbers all off season and stuff. So it's interesting to have Parker, who's Big 12 centric, and Kansas, right? So you just assume Power 5, good team. Kansas has been recruiting really at the bottom of the barrel in Power 5. And maybe that may not be as much a surprise if you look at raw numbers of Coastal Carolina's talent versus Kansas's talent and recruiting. Do you feel that to be the case, Parker, with Kansas?
Yeah. Here's the thing about that. So I was pulling up the team talent rankings because I think those are just a good initial brush of hey, what is the raw, talking about raw talent, what's on the roster. So, Iowa State's 56 nationally. You're like, okay, all right. I understand they may not have those playmakers. Kansas doesn't even load the first 10 screens. Kansas has just been abysmal with recruiting. Also, that Coastal Carolina quarterback is a redshirt freshman. That was his first start.
Really?
You cannot let it that just can't happen, man. And here's the thing. So I talked to David Beatty at Big 12 Media Days probably 2 years ago, I think, because he got fired he got fired 2 years ago. So this is the year
2
he
years
got
ago,
fired.
yeah.
And David Beatty looked at me and he said, when I got here, I had 36 scholarship players and 5 of them walked out the door during our first meeting. And so you're looking at 31 out of, depending on how true that is, whatever the magnitudes are, whatever, you're looking at less than half of a Power 5 roster. And now you're here in the day, the age of, not only the age of it's hard to recruit when you're losing, but it's hard to recruit to Lawrence when Instagram exists. And if I get an offer from Lawrence or Florida International, I'm considering going to Miami. Even if it's 4 or 5 G5, that is also hard. You tack on losing, you just can't replace spots like this. And so Kansas is in this terrible succession where friggin' Mark Mangino and Charlie Weiss sold out for JUCO kids, decimated the roster, and then you just can't recover from that. It's just it's so hard.
And the other thing I was going to, sorry, I wanted one more takeaway too, to pivot off of that, because I know we got a lot of Kansas recruiting guys here. But the other thing was, we heard the Navy coach explain that they just limited actual full contact practices. But also it's interesting talking about the Tech Florida State game is that one of their COVID precautions was not practicing kicks as much. So and he said, that was because they felt it was unnecessary, and so we're going to see more of this. There was just a handful of games. I mean, in 2 weeks we're going to be full steam ahead. Maybe in 4 weeks we're going to have all Power 5 teams, and so it's going to be interesting to see what corners are cut during practice and where that shows up. So if you're a betting type, maybe Graham, you can find some inside info on who's not practicing kicks
and who's not hitting after that Navy BYU game last week.
Yeah, man.
The not tackle list, I can probably retire at the end of this year.
Dude, I really think prognostication wise and betting wise, the real thing that it makes me think about is if you guys think about, I think in the past couple of years there has been sort of a trend that defenses have not figured out offenses, but defenses are not as flat-footed against the modern sort of spread concept all go offenses, right? And there's been defenses that have had a lot of success. Iowa State, ironically, is one of them. TCU's done this with the 3-5. You've had some I think not quite a shift back, but a little bit of reaction from defenses. But if y'all will remember, sort of in the heyday of Texas Tech with Graham Harrell as the quarterback, and it's holy shit, what are we gonna do? I always remember those offenses as being if you can't make if you can't make a modern offense that wants to throw and wants to spread it out, if you can't hurry them, if you can't make them uncomfortable, they're just going to score 50 points. And that was really what I thought a lot about in that Charlotte game, is like that kid looked so good. And I'm sure that he's probably better than his ranking. But I think a lot of that is that like the level of quarterback play is such at the high school level now that if you have a pretty good quarterback and you have the right system where he's just throwing to spots and he's making like 2 decisions or he's reading one half of the field, if you can't get to him or put him off his timing, like he's just going to score on you. And I wonder about how I really think this is going to be a season where if you have a truly transcendent defense, which I think UGA does, or if you just have a very good defense, you're actually going to have an advantage, because I really think that we're going to see more upsets where you just have a dude catch fire because he's not facing a defense that has had the time or the physicality or the talent to sort of like touch him. I mean, I remember one of the big things about that I found so interesting about those Leach teams at Texas Tech was that it would just be like they would run the same 6 plays like 85 times, and you would interview the quarterback afterwards and he'd be like, yeah, I know, it was just like practice. Because he just wouldn't get touched. It was just the same decision over and over and over again. And I think if you don't have time to practice, you don't have time to put in the concepts defensively that puts a spread quarterback in conflict. And so I'm really interested to see, like, I think TCU is actually a good example, Parker, where you have, like, and correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like that, there's some offensive rebuilding over the past couple of years. I'm trying to be polite.
Here's the question. Do you want to get me started on that? Just before you finish this question, do you want to get me started on the TCU offense or not? Just decide that before you ask.
Okay. It's not
all we really want to know is how well are they going to run the ball with our former 5-star recruit, Zach Evans?
That's true. Yeah, Zach Evans.
I don't want to break news, but it may look like he might be the only guy that's going to play. So, yeah, who knows?
Yeah. But see, I actually think for a team like TCU, it's kind of advantageous, right? If you're trying to resurrect your offense, you want to play in a context where there's no time for defense to install things that they need to install. Because if you look at those Kirby Smart defenses and the Nick Saban defenses that have really killed spread teams, like when Clemson is just getting destroyed in the national championship, it is an incredibly complex piece of machinery where one little thing goes wrong and there's a dude running 40 yards downfield. Right. Mm-hmm. And when Alabama gets it right, it's like, oh, we've disguised every coverage 3 times and it looks like everyone's just standing up and we don't know if it's zone or it's man. And there's like 6 stunts up front. And also we have a spy who also might be in man coverage. And when that works, it's like Trevor Lawrence just like staring up at the camera and when they're down 25 points. Right. But when it doesn't, I think there's an advantage to having an offense looking for its feet in a time when, I don't know that even Alabama is going to be able to do the pattern matching the way they want to this year. I mean, you just don't have the time on the field.
And I think you definitely need to isolate, like, I think turnover gets, not turnovers, but like turnover personnel definitely is going to matter. So you want to look for teams that have like a lot of returning experience and good defensive head coaches. I think they'll have some benefit because that's what like Matt Campbell has a great defense. The defense looked awful. Just let a Sunbelt team do whatever they wanted. And had some just clear gas, like Louisiana had a 78-yard touchdown that was just like, dude, you let the guy run by you. Like, what are you doing? And so a couple of those, I think that's totally true, just because defensive complexity has had to ratchet up so much to match offensive complexity. And so I think absolutely pass rush is going to be super important this year because you've got to be able to disrupt. And if you can't disrupt, then you're sitting back and you're looking at safeties who are relying on one of these pre-snap calls, who potentially may not have had enough time to learn how each other play. Like, there's a little bit of chemistry there, but there's also a little bit of just like complexity and learning systems that I think will be, made more prominent if, for instance, you don't get a good pass rush or you don't have a lockdown corner that you can rely on.
Yeah. And I think one of the advantages of having a coach like Gary Patterson right now is that, I think you can rely on dudes who, in moments like this, who are defensive, to like strip it down. And I think we're going to see a lot more of sort of like dime base, where you just go out there and you're just like, I think I have better guys than you. And I think the disadvantage you get in that kind of situation is when you don't, right? So like if you're playing, one of the reasons I think Clemson might win the national championship is like, I just don't know. I don't know if anybody can run with them like on like a person to person basis. Like, and recruiting wise, there aren't many teams.
No, there's maybe 3 or 4 out there. But I mean, I also, you're talking about all these issues that are facing offenses and defenses. And, I'm sure coaches and the coach personality and how kind of like, hyper focused and paranoid they are about letting anything through the cracks. I'm sure they're working on all that, but like watching games this weekend, it seems like no one practiced special teams at all. And, I had an interesting conversation with a guy on Twitter about this on Saturday evening of like, you look at a Nick Saban or a Kirby Smart and like how anal they are about everything they do in their program, and them, like a lot of other head coaches, they just kind of leave special teams to chance. And, it's like watching the Georgia Tech Florida State game and all of the kicking woes that happened there. And then, I mean, the Iowa State game, like, yeah, like they let, Louisiana push them around a little bit. But like the thing that determined that game was 2 punt return touchdowns, like that was the difference in that game. And so it's like, I wonder, maybe this week it was special teams, but it'll be interesting as more teams start to play their first game to see kind of like what is that thing that got glossed over in this abbreviated time with less practice. What are we going to find that it's like with Georgia, will it be offensive line play, will it be quarterback play, will it be whatever? And it's like I think it's going to be something for everybody just because the whole schedule has been condensed so much. I think it could honestly make for like one of the more entertaining months of football we ever see, just because it could be totally chaotic.
And I know this is like not a sentence that anyone outside the SEC footprint wants to hear, but I feel like that's a huge advantage if you're the SEC because you don't start play till the 26th. And I mean, you can sure as shit bet that every SEC coach watched those games this last weekend and was like, we're doing 2 extra periods of punt return practice. And so I think you have an advantage by starting later, which I don't think that's why the SEC started later, but I definitely think that like they're going to 100% take advantage of that opportunity. Well, let me transition this out with just one last note. Before we go in to talk about more specific stat stuff, is there anything like any kind of like other big picture sort of like, I would say like heuristic or about how you're thinking about the season that you've kind of divined from this first week? Like, has this changed the picture for you or the way that you think about the season or what you think is going to determine the season? Or is it kind of like been consistent for y'all so far?
As a fan, I'm a lot more scared of like the games on the schedule that maybe a few weeks ago I just kind of chalked up as 20 or 30 point wins. Like
Mississippi State.
Yeah, Mississippi State I've been terrified of all offseason.
Oh, that game is going to be so annoying for everybody. But that's who's the other cross rival for Georgia?
It's Mississippi State and Alabama.
Mississippi State, Alabama, Auburn.
Wait, no, they set up to play Alabama. That seems crazy because all the outreach. I'm kind of out of the SEC loop, but there was all the outrage about like Arkansas was like, we have Florida and Georgia. This is bullshit or whatever.
Well, so Alabama. Well,
sorry.
It's about who we. No, it's fine. It's about who we added. So like we were already going to play Alabama.
Oh,
we were already going to play Auburn. So we added Mississippi State and Arkansas. So yeah, we added
4 total. It's not. They didn't replace. They added 2 more.
They added 2 more. Yeah. And I do think that these teams, I think UJ will be fine in a game like Mississippi State, because if you look at their recruiting rankings on the offensive line, and this was true when Mullen was there, it was true the last time we played them. I don't think that they have the offensive line to compete with Georgia this year. But I do think that a team that is willing to be dynamic and has a running quarterback and is just willing to say fuck it and throw the ball and like go for it on 4th downs a couple of times a game, like that, you don't want to play that team this year. Like you absolutely don't want to play a team that just has like, I mean, like I don't want to play Louisville this year, like because I feel like that with that combination of coach and talent, like they're just going to go for it on 4th down like 4 or 5 times a game, and they have a dude who can run.
Yeah, and they also have more production than almost anyone in the country.
Yeah, and so like you don't want to play West Virginia, like you don't want to play Neil Brown when he's like, I have nothing to lose. Like, everybody thinks I'm going to suck. Like
I suspended 2 players and I still won my game, but.
I think that there's just a certain profile of team that I am suddenly like a little bit more on. Like if Lane Kiffin were still, if we had to play Ole Miss, I would not want to play Ole Miss right now. because Lane Kiffin is like banging co-eds and like doing lines of coke like before the games in a normal year. So God only knows what that dude's.
Justin just texted me and said I should pivot to stats.
The delegate from the Democratic People's Republic of Stats War has no comment on the Lane Kiffin issue.
Yeah. You is collegefootballgraphs.com is what you just is that this your first season of doing it?
Yes, I literally just like the week before the season was like, let's do something crazy. And it's so cool. Actually, my friend Garrett McClintock, who is a BYU writer, bought this domain like a couple months ago and was like, dude, do something with it. I'm not doing anything with it. And so I just put up some of the most important stats I think that we should look at. So cfb-crafts.com, it has like leaderboards. And then I just released some box scores that are not where I want them to be, but I'm just trying to get the information out there that kind of has some key factors from some games just to let people see the way I think about stats and kind of just created a useful tool for me.
Oh, it's so cool. I don't know if you can see it on the Discord, but I'm scrolling through it.
Yeah, we can.
So it's like,
I'm not in the Discord. I didn't get the other invite.
Hold on. Let me hit you up with that.
But it's just a super simple, which I like. It's basic. It's clean. I mean, anybody that's crunching numbers is used to looking at data like this. And you can just sort and find. Doesn't copy and paste into CSV very well. I'm just saying. But
I bet I can add a download option. Let me remind me of that later.
Yeah.
I want to when we're in the Discord, I'm gonna send a chat on the Google Meet here in a second, but with the Discord invite. When we're in the Discord, I have some thoughts about not negative thoughts, just like I love this website and I'm so excited that you made it.
But I wanted to say really quick before you get into that is I was surprised because early on Clemson was at the top of the charts, and I mean obviously Texas went nuts. But one of the things I'm looking at, and you can tell me, Parker, if this is a valuable stat, is I'm kind of starting to track. I started tracking net yards per play, and now I've pivoted towards net EPA, which is your I'm doing average, not total, but total PPA offense minus total PP defense, and that gives you really a clean, comparable data for which teams are really, really, really good. And obviously, the top five, all the playoff teams have been in the top 5 or 6 of that category. So is that something that you're tracking, or is that just me being just redundant on what this data is already showing us?
No, I think net PPD points per drive. We can talk about that in a minute. I think net EPA is really, really interesting. Something that I haven't really played around with though is kind of the weighting there, because I do not believe that it is 1-to-1. I don't believe that offensive EPA is as predictive as defensive EPA.
Yeah.
So defensive EPA is going to be a lot noisier. And so definitely I think the EPA margin on the leaderboards is actually 0.6 times offense and 0.4 times defense, which is just kind of a rough and quick and dirty way to say offense is a little more predictive going forward than defense is. But I think net is super important, especially with yards per play. I would stick to early downs just because like third down, I mean, if you're always facing 3rd and 2, I'm not going to penalize you for getting 2 yards on 3rd and 2 every time.
So hold on, before we get too deep into this, because I actually have some other questions. I want to talk about this more, but let's back up for people who maybe are at home being like, the hell is going on? So one of the very helpful stats that we have sort of started tracking in the past, I would say, a year kind of, was when it's really I know it's been around for a long time, but it's really gotten prominent in the last year or so. Here, I'm going to mute you on the Discord there. There we go. Is EPA. So Josh, do you want to just give us the elevator pitch for EPA?
Well, I mean, I feel like I'm talking for Parker here, but he's helped me out, so maybe he can quiz me on this. But I mean, okay, so I always think of I was looking at success rate, which is binary, right? Yes, no. Was the play successful? Was it not? So that's a great measure. You're going to get a percentage. You want to be, somewhere in the 45 to 50% on your competitive games, and obviously your non-competitive games, you want to be a little more than that. But beyond the binary of the success rate is explosive, or EPA, which basically measures each play and how successful or how not successful it is. So whereas a 3-yard run on 3rd and 2 is more valuable than a 3-yard run on 1st and 10. So if you look at those EPAs, it says, okay, first of all, EPA, I believe, is a measure of the successful plays. So you can actually get beat. You can maybe lose a success rate battle, but you may still have a decent explosive play rate, which means your variance is high. You're going to have a lot of unsuccessful plays, but those successful plays are really successful. And one of the things that is important is we looked at the Monken running game, which he didn't run a lot and he wasn't super successful, but those successful runs that Monken had when he was calling plays as a head coach at UFN were very, very successful. So he actually had his explosive rate for his rushing game was higher than UGA's for those seasons. So so it's just a measure of how successful and how good your successful plays are.
So for people who, Parker, like grade his performance, and then I have a couple of notes.
No, that's great. That's the elevator pitch. 1st and 10, 3 yards is bad. 3rd and 3, 3 yards is good. So yards per play is kind of a noisy stat. It's not necessarily that it's misleading. It's just not an informative signal. And so EPA translates yards to points in context, which is kind of the tagline.
And I think that if you are a sort of like Chapel Bell Curve native and you've heard us talk about, we will often talk about, before EPA, we talk about like who won the explosiveness battle, who won the success battle. EPA kind of does that holistically in a much neater way. Like it is a noise filter so far as I can tell. Like it just keeps, it doesn't filter out all noise, but it gives you a much better idea of like, even though success rate and like points per drive or whatever you want to do for your explosiveness thing, even though those are really great stats, they do have some noise in them, right? So like a good example that I saw, I think Josh, I don't think it was you and Josh, but Josh and I and somebody were talking about this on Twitter the other day, is that like success rate and explosiveness are really hard to read when you're watching like an Army game, right? Because Army is Army is like always going to win the success rate battle pretty much, but sometimes they don't because they go for it on 4th a lot, and sometimes they don't because they just like eat a bunch of clock and they don't run that many plays. And so there's a lot of variables with success rate. So I think EPA is a very, very good stat for just like you said, giving us more context. I guess it's not a total noise filter, but it does give us a lot more context, I think.
Hey, how about we're at 28. Let's wrap this up on Periscope, but continue on Discord, and it'll be a chance to call to action on our Periscope and our Patreon. Why don't we do that? What do you say?
Absolutely. Okay, so if you like Chapel Bell Curve, if you like the Battle Hymnal, this product, then you will love our Discord. Our Patreon, you can get on it for $1 a month or $5 a month or whatever amount you want. Go buck wild in there. I don't care. It is very cheap. It is a very fun It is a very, very fun community of people who talk about Georgia football, but we also have a channel for weather because we have some weather nerds. We have a channel for like me to talk about Magic the Gathering Arena. Basically, we have a whole, it's a nerd channel. We have a channel for, I'm going to make a beer channel when we're done here. So it's a very fun group of people, and we try to moderate it really heavily. All three of us and Justin are on there every day. We will give you stats. We will give you images that we don't release, and I'll give you my raw R data stats to your heart's content,
and the continued discussion of our Periscope show.
And you will get the continued discussion of our Periscope show, which is where we're about to go. So if you want to get on patreon.com/Chapel Bell Curve and sign up, I will add you to the Discord before the end of this conversation. So
Graham, do you want to say something real quick before we go?
Oh no, I was just saying the Weather Channel chat on the Discord is popping.
All right.
We actually have two real meteorologists.
I was just putting up a poll because it's $1. It's just
all right. So yeah, like DM or text or do the thing. We're going continuing on. Thanks for watching, and we'll be down the road on Twitter.